Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast with your hosts Griffin Palmer, CJ Hickman, Jason Cabrera, and Ryan Mitchell.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is Friday, June 1st. We're in June. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast, the official podcast of thefantasyfootballfanatics.com. I'm your host, Griffin Palmer, joined by the one and only CJ, the Hitman Hickman. CJ, what's up, buddy?
What's up, man? What's going on? We're getting closer. What is it, about like 96 days now to football or something like that?
From kickoff, we're like, what is it, like month and a half or so? No, not a month and a half. A little bit over 2 months away from getting in the thick of training camp. It's so close, and yet there's this annoying, terrible buffer in July where basically nothing happens for like 4 or 5 weeks, and everybody goes on their break before the season, and it's just this dead period. So.
I mean, normally I would hate this, but, you know, just coming off of that Super Bowl, I appreciate this because I need my guys to get their
calm
rest.
before the storm for you.
We need it. We're trying to get back there. So
you're getting ready to experience something you've never had to deal with before, CJ, and that is the ebbs and flows of retaining a title.
Yeah, man.
It's not fun when your team sucks the following year. I can say that from experience.
No. I think we got good coaching, man.
Your team wasn't nuked like mine was after our Ravens' most recent Super Bowl. I think your team's just, you're good to go. You're going to be competitive. But yeah, welcome to the show, everybody. So today we have an amazing show for you guys. We are going to be talking about alternative fantasy football formats. So we get these questions all the time. This is more or less expanding on what we did last show. On Tuesday, we talked about all these different league management questions, adjustments on preferences for league formats, ways to play, rule changes, how to approach things, all types of things of that nature. But today we're going to be talking about all those different formats in which you can play fantasy football. And this is not the end-all, be-all. There's plenty of other ones that we probably won't get to, but we covered the big ones, the ones that you're going to most commonly see if you look around the interwebs. So we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about a little bit of what they are, how they're played, the things you need to know without really deep diving, because we're going to do a bunch of specials as we move into the offseason, into that dead period. We'll be getting into a lot of this stuff much more in-depth, but we're just going to touch on it now. A lot of people are forming leagues. We want to make sure you guys know what you're getting yourselves into, and we'll go from there. So before we get to that, make sure you guys subscribe wherever you're listening, because as you may suspect, if you are listening now in the beginning of June, you may be first time here at the show with us. Welcome to the show. But we are a year-round podcast, and if you want to be with us every step of the way, twice a week, as it is now, simply subscribe wherever you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, formerly known as iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, YouTube, the works. We are all over. If you want to support the show and help us keep doing what we're doing, we greatly appreciate that. Head over to patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. And the thing you can really do more than anything else, if you really want to help us, and finances aren't necessarily the way that you can, so just rate the show. If you guys give us a rating and you give us a review, it helps us out a ton, brings new people in, it helps us keep growing. It is a very beneficial thing, and we are very grateful if you guys take that 5 seconds out of your way to go submit a review.
It breathes life to the show.
It does, and we greatly appreciate that. And it'll probably help you get into our new listener league, which is something we're going to be talking about in the not-too-distant future, how you can submit for that. So, lots of stuff to get to, but let's get into the show today. So we're going to start with a warm-up, and our warm-up is simply just because we were expecting you on Tuesday's show, CJ, and I want your thoughts on certain things. Obviously, life happens. So we're just going to send some rapid-fire questions your way, just kind of running down some of the questions that we got. So I'll start off, rapid-fire. First thing that comes to mind. You can go into it in depth if you want to or not. So first off, normal, snake, or auction drafts? What's your preference?
I'm going to have to go auction. If I can do win, play, show, I'm about to do auction is the show. It's a win. I'm sorry, and then I'm gonna have to show snake, and then and then I'm definitely not doing any of that. What is that one format?
Linear ones where they draft like the NFL draft.
I don't like that.
I forgot to reword that. The guy who it was I'm not gonna throw his name under the bus. It was a listener, a faithful listener. He said normal. He meant linear, I think, because normal is snake. Standard is snake, so yeah. IR spots, yay or nay?
IR spots, I would say yay. Because there's so many times where we'll get players that get injured in the preseason or in training camp like that, and they'll have that that temporary IR where they'll be eligible to come back. Like 6 months or something like that. So you got a star player that can be able to come back in October or November, you can be able to ride them out.
And especially,
within those rest of those weeks, especially if they're at a very plentiful position as far as being a starter or getting the opportunities to be able to get touches. So running backs, wide receivers, any of those kind of positions. Even if you get into IDP, you get a big guy like say Eric Berry. If his injury last year wasn't that severe and they put him on that short time IR and he can be able to come back, that's a guy that's coming back into a starter position that you already know is a beast. And they can be able to get you those points on IDP. So I will say yeah.
There you go. A nice explanation. I appreciate that. So we're on the same page so far. Let's see. Thoughts on vetoing trades and the best methods?
I think, well, for me, I'm a firm believer if it's somebody new in your league and they're making a very stupid trade, and some people will say trade take advantage of, or
harsher words at times.
Well, I'll save my jokes for the lounge. So go to the Patreon. You can be able to get all my jokes from there. That's what the good ones.
Yeah, I hate that you still call that the lounge. Nobody calls it the lounge but you.
It's so popular. Listen, so I would say, look, first of all, as a league manager, if I see a trade that is like, say last year, when what my man Deshaun Watson was going on that tear, and somebody tried to package him and then try to end up getting like Le'Veon Bell, Julio, and maybe like somebody else. You can throw somebody else out there, like a tight end or something like that. And it was only Deshaun Watson in that trade. Listen, as a manager, look, I'm looking at this and I'm saying this is stupid because no way. Yes, Deshaun Watson was going through an incredible run and he was making a lot of points. But at the end of the day, these are three guys that can separately on their own put up those type of numbers. So I would not do it. But once again, I wouldn't veto the trade for me personally. I want that person to learn. They'll learn from that experience. They'll realize, because then they get their heart broken. What was it, like 5-6 weeks later when he gets on IR? Now you've lost
after week 7.
Yeah, you lost those 3 star talents that you got, and now you're left with empty or backup quarterback position. So for me, I think people have to learn. So for me, I would not veto a trade. Now, if there's collusion,
there it is.
There's a collusion. If you're getting towards the end of the playoffs and you see some teams, you already got buddies
end of the regular season getting close to them,
and they're trying to do some stuff like that. Okay, then I think that's a league manager have to step in there, because the collusion, I can't have the collusion right there. The buddy system, Eric and Harrison, we can't have it in the league. We can't do it. Can't have it.
Name drop.
Yeah, congratulations, Eric, being a dad, man. Congratulations.
Yes, member of our league of record just had his kids. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about on the show, collusion is the only way that I think vetoing should be a thing. Otherwise, it's live and learn. Let's do 2 more. There's a lot that we covered, but we went way more in depth. So free agent acquisition budget, aka FAB, or waiver priority.
Dang, I gotta pick one or the other.
Yeah, which one would you rather see in your league? What's your preference?
I would say FAB.
Well done.
Good answer. I think I would do FAB for me.
There you go. We haven't talked about any of this, by the way, and see that we can agree at times. There we go.
Never.
Let's see. Let's end with this one actually. What is your ideal roster composition? So what's your favorite roster for a fantasy football team?
Fantasy football team.
Trade carefully.
Okay. All right. If I could do, not everybody does extensive like we do. So you meaning like quarterbacks, running backs?
Yeah. What like 1, 2, 2, whatever you want to do. Like, but what's your favorite roster to play fantasy football with?
Okay. All right. So I like to do, of course, 1 quarterback, unless I'm doing a 2 quarterback league, whatever. So I like that. I like to do 2 running backs. I like to have 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, super flex.
Here it is.
Tight end, wide receiver, running back, and then so that's pretty much it. And of course, your kicker and your defense.
Oh, so you don't like the IDP? I see how it is.
Well, listen, not everybody does IDP like we do extensively.
It's not a matter for them. It's your preference. What's your preference?
Okay, and then of course when you get into IDP, I like my defense. I like 3 defensive line players. I like my 3 linebackers. I like my 3 defensive back players, meaning cornerbacks and safeties included, and then of course a flex.
There it is. You got there.
I like that.
You like our League of Record format, so
yes, that is my favorite. That is my favorite.
Love it. All right, so with every question that you just answered, you agreed with both Jason and I from last week's show. Last week, Tuesday's show, rather.
Look at that. We're so in sync. I don't even have to be here.
It's so rare that it happens, and now it will probably never happen again for the remainder of the season.
We ruined it.
We peaked too early and burned too bright, and now it's all downhill from here. So, with that, I guess let's go ahead and move on to the pessimistic future. Okay. Top headlines from around the league. There's only 2 things really worth talking about, because we can talk about, people were spotted or not at practice. It's OTAs. It's optional. It does not matter. Sterling Shepard is seen to get significantly more snaps. How can he get more snaps than when he was the starter last year? That's all news. You can talk about a lot of things along these lines, but the key things to talk about, I think, are injury-related and acquisition. Yeah. So quarterback Carson Wentz, Philadelphia Eagles quarterback that is, was seen jogging. He didn't have any noticeable limp, so that's good news there. Yes, Allen Robinson, of course, coming back from that knee injury, he participated in practice during OTAs, and by all reports, he seemed to be doing well, so that's good news there. And the probably biggest bit of news that's actually worth covering, the Seattle Seahawks have signed former Giants and Jets wide receiver, unrestricted free agent as of that point, Brandon Marshall. So they've signed him to fill the Jimmy Graham role, a red zone threat. I don't know how much of a contributor he will be on that team because they have so many needs just to buy someone like him time to get open. So if they ever get into the red zone, he might be nice, but I think they're going to really struggle to get to that portion of the field where he's going to be useful. So we'll see. We'll deep dive into him on fantasy later on, but do you have any hot takes on the Brandon Marshall signing?
I mean, my hot takes are not even really this signing. It's really on another wide receiver that's yet to be signed. You know, to me, I'm looking at this, I'm like, what the heck is going on with Dez? Like, I mean, I think the Seahawks, when you compare Dez and Brandon Marshall last year, I think Dez had a better season than Brandon Marshall. I mean, look, it can probably be a semantic situation as far as you saying, well, you know, the Giants, they didn't have all this stuff like that. But yeah, and then of course he got injured. Oh yeah, but still, like the games that Brandon Marshall did play, and the focus was on him to be the number 1 guy. He did not step up. He had a terrible showing.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what Seattle is seeing in him. Like, what are they expecting to get? Because the Jets and those glorious Jet years before he ended up leaving there and going to New York, he's not that guy anymore. He's not that player.
Yeah.
And that was my big argument. What was it, last season when he got signed in there, and I was having a little not Twitter battles, but little fantasy battles between you and Jason about this. I'm like, look, I just don't get excited about this pick because this guy is not the same player like he used to be.
It's hard to get excited about a very old wide receiver on a new team in a new offense with a new quarterback and who hasn't been productive since the 2015 season, coming off the injury and everything. It's just,
I mean, he's a funny guy. I like him on NFL show. What is that? Inside the NFL.
I'm a huge fan of Brandon Marshall. I wish the best for him. I was hoping my Ravens would sign him because I think we could really use him in the red zone. But I just don't know how he's going to fit in.
You just got to break that narrative of being the Expendables of the NFL. You got to break that, man.
Look, if you're the Expendables, you have to have expendable pieces, and you need to have a pretty deep roster to do that. So it would be nice. But yeah, I think that he has the opportunity. I think this is going to be a very low floor, probably mid to high range ceiling, depending on how it all works out. It's going to fall more on, I think, on the Seattle offense than it's going to fall on Brandon Marshall. So we'll see how that shakes out. So I guess with that, let's get to why everyone's here, and that is our topic of the day, which is our alternate fantasy football formats. So we're going to talk about some different formats in which you can play fantasy, the different league compositions. We'll talk about some different not draft strategies, but different formats in which you draft teams that kind of go side and side with it. Again, we'll deep dive on this down the line about the really finer points and your strategic moves and how to approach these drafts and this, that, the other. This is more of an overview. So I guess let's just jump right in, and we'll start with our main different format changes. So obviously, when it comes to scoring, there are a couple key things that you generally see. You'll generally see things like standard league, which is usually 4 point per passing touchdown, 1 point for every 25 yards thrown by the quarterback, 6 points for every receiving or rushing touchdown, 1 point for every 10 yards rushed. That's standard. Generally, well, I can't even say across all formats because some have moved to PPR and half point, but that's still the masses play that. That's still by far and away the norm. Other things that you see, and it's important to know the focus of your league, like what scoring format it is, because that's going to really dictate who you focus when in drafts. If it's a PPR league, you're going to move wide receivers up higher. You're going to move the chain guys up higher than you would in standard draft. So with that, there's half point per reception, where they get a point for every 5 yards that they get. Sorry, they get. I can't talk. The equivalent of a point for every half yard they get, aka they get half a point for every ball they catch. I can talk. And then there's PPR where they get the ball. They get a point just for catching the ball as opposed to catching it 10 yards down the field. So they get the points for catching the ball on top of the production that they obtain. So this is obviously great for those smaller wide receivers who get a lot of production.
Kamara's, Devontae Freeman's, those type of players.
Yep, your pass catching running backs. This is a huge boost for them as well. It was first conceived as a way to really make wide receivers more relevant, because you always saw heavy running backs go early, and this kind of leveled that playing field. I know that I believe you are too. I know Jason likes full point per reception because he's a crazy person, but not necessarily a crazy person, but he's all about passing games. So he always invests heavily at the wide receiver. I take a much more, I'm going to build the best core I can. So and the running backs are a much harder thing to stream. So I like the half point per reception approach, because that does not overinflate anything. It doesn't give, he caught the ball and picked up not even a yard, but he gets a whole point in fantasy where that guy, made a heavy contested catch 10 yards down the field, moved the chains, and kept his offense on the field. But they got the same points based on what league scoring format you're in. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think half point per reception is that sweet spot, but that's the different formats. Do you have any thoughts on these, CJ?
I'm gonna say the full point that can come real, like those Monday Night Football games that we talk about, man. I mean, you're in a dogfight, and then you're going against a guy that's up like 30 points. You're going throughout the game. You got like 3 or 4 players playing. You get those points, and then it comes down to that last play, and that guy catches the ball. And you get that full point versus that half point, man. That's what it be sometimes. It be like that. So
yeah, it's great when it works out for you.
Yeah, of course.
But if he hadn't had the full points, you might not have been in that situation to begin with. It's case by case. You can't just blame one. Well, you can blame one player if they really crap the bed. But it's a team sport. So
it is.
That's the key differences that you need to know between when you hear us talking standard, half point per reception, and PPR, which is full point per reception. That's what we're talking about. It's how many additional points you get based on your scoring format when you catch the ball. You'll see other formats which we weren't going to bring up today, where it's also points per rushing attempt. And generally, that's a very small amount. You won't see a full point per rush, because then your running backs are going to be averaging at another 15 to 20 points a game on top of what they're already doing. But like our big league of record, we have that put in as well. So it's a whole other thing, but you probably won't see it very often. Another format that you will see, and this is picking up a lot of steam lately, is the 2 quarterback leagues. So it's your standard fantasy football team, except you start 2 quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Now, this is one of those rare exceptions that I blow up my normal draft strategy. I wait very late on quarterbacks. Anyone who's followed the show for any period of time knows this. But for me, my approach to 2 quarterback leagues is that I will generally draft one of my quarterbacks in the top 3 rounds. I'm going to try and get one of those stud guys, and then I resume my normal process. I'll grab a couple of quarterbacks, that I can stream, that secondary guy, but I want at least one superstar quarterback, so it's just one spot I don't have to worry about. It's pretty similar to how people try and draft their superstar running back. It's that plug-and-play guy that you just leave them in regardless of matchup, and then it's just one less thing you have to deal with. I know there are people out there that say, well, no, you get those studs when they fall and you just get a couple mid-range quarterbacks, and that's a valid approach too. It depends on how you like to do things, but you also have to know your league. If you know that you're in a 2 quarterback league and quarterbacks are going to go with 10 out of the first 12 picks, probably not a good idea to use that strategy. You're going to want to get in on that quarterback run. Sometimes you have to chase the runs. We always say usually steer away. Start a run, don't be a part of it. But you got to do what you got to do sometimes. CJ, what are your thoughts on 2 quarterback leads? What's your approach?
Well, first of all, I really like it. The last time I played it, it was really, really fun, man. I think I had like Cam Newton and I don't know, somebody else. I think it was probably Russell Wilson when he first came out. So it was pretty fun. But now I think even more ever. Like back then, it was tough to you had to get your stud, and then after that, it was like, it was some real slim pickings after that, man. Because like you said, you had those runs, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I can wait to get that other guy. And then you end up waiting too long, and then now here you are, you're in a very sticky situation as far as like slim pickings. So I think now more than ever, especially with the years as the years go on, we're having so many good young quarterbacks coming out, and they're in better situations. So I think even now more, you can be able to, I agree with you. You get your stud guy. But you know what? I would probably chill out for a little bit, and pick up my next guy later on. I'll probably wait till like the 5th or 6th round to be able to do that, because once again, this position is so deep. You got your starters, and then of course you got these some of these rookies you can probably take a shot on, and you think that he's to be able to do good. Like a secondary guy that I like for 2 quarterbacks is Tyrod Taylor, man. I like his situation in Cleveland, man. I think he's going to ball out, especially with those the weapons that he has there, and he's mobile. So, but as far as going forward, I think that it's a good format that I like. I hope it picks up some more steam and gets some more play than it does.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's fun. And sometimes you'll see like a true super flex. And that's something I highly stress that you guys keep an eye on, because you'll see commissioners. And if you're new to a league that's been around for a while, you'll see people who won't want to give you all the facts. And so I always say, when you get into a league, check the scoring format. That's the most important thing you can do, because I'll see times where it's a flex position. Then you go and you look, and it's a super flex, which by that we mean it can be a running back, it can be a wide receiver as per usual, it could be a tight end, or it could be a quarterback, which in that case, obviously you want to get the quarterback, because that effectively makes it a 2 quarterback league, because quarterbacks are the safest things to have a high floor and obviously a good ceiling. I mean, they generally will outscore the rest of your league, which is why they have deflated scoring when it comes to yardage, and deflated scoring standard when it comes to passing touchdowns, because they're involved in every play. They get a lot of points. So little side note right there, learn your league, learn the rules, look at your rosters and what your limitations are, whether that be with IR spots, super flexes, things of that nature. With that, let's go ahead and move on. Oh, actually, the next point was Superflex.
There you go.
I should probably pay attention to show docs that I've put together. So, yeah, similar strategy as 2 quarterback leagues. When it's a full Superflex, including quarterbacks, you want to focus on those quarterbacks. So, basically, what I was just saying. Your thoughts on Superflex leagues there, CJ? I love that I got ahead of myself there. That's kind of funny.
No, it was good. We were flowing, but it
was a good flow. I should have just not said anything.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think we should. I think people should probably incorporate that more, especially like if you've been having a like we were talking about with the standard. Like if you had a standard draft format, you're doing the snake. You've been doing that for a while, man. You know what? Switch it up. Like switch it up a little bit, man. Add some new juice to your league, man, and do some stuff like this. We definitely are a huge fan of auction. We definitely should suggest you'd be able to do that to spice up your league. But yeah, this right here too, as far as draft formats and adding the super flex to it, man, I like it, and I think you should do it too.
Well, there you go. So let's I guess we'll just move on. That covers it all. I know that Jason's approach here is that Jason, if you've been with us for any period of time, he is such an unbelievable buy-in on 2 things. He will do whatever it takes to get his running back, David Johnson, and then it is simply best player available. Whatever your needs are, I don't care. So Jason is a firm believer in a super flex that you definitely will go after the highest end player available, because it's less about position and just more about what's out there. And there's some merit to that. You just got to kind of pay attention to it, because it's it's league specific. Just because there's a quarterback that you can put in there, maybe the quarterbacks are deflated in their scoring. So these are all things that you have to learn. You have to take into account. You have to know your leagues. So there you go. With that, let's go into some of those alternate scoring formats as we were just kind of, man, this is a nice flow, and it's all accidental.
Yeah,
so, no, it's all intentional. What am I talking about? We're just this good. So we already mentioned points per rushing attempt, not necessarily full point. Generally what you see here is you'll see like 0.1 or 0.2 that go with each rush, and it's a way to incentivize. You see this pop up more recently with the running back by committees that you're seeing pop up. Your running backs aren't getting as much volume as they used to be. There's not that many workhorse backs out there anymore that you can lock in for 20-plus rushing attempts and maybe 5 or 6 receptions every single week. It's just not the way the majority of the league functions anymore.
Yeah.
So as a way to compensate for that, you'll see a lot of leagues that will go out there and they'll add this extra points per rushing attempt because that's a way to kind of stimulate the running back market and keep the position viable. Because you see pushes now, and this is not new. Well, I guess it is new, but it's not news, where you see a lot of people who are pushing to remove one of the running back positions from fantasy. They think it should be one running back and then an additional flex spot. So...
It's crazy. It's crazy, man.
I am so against it. It's insane because at some point you're just decentivizing the strategy that goes into drafting. If it's all flexes, then there's no strategy anymore. You're just going to take players. So I'm very against that, but that's why you will see this. You'll also see points per first down. So I actually kind of like this more than I like the points per reception approach because if it's third down, you gotta break that yardage. You gotta get to that goalpost, and they do. That's a big play. That's something that keeps the offense on the field. That's huge for the team. It's in real life, and so I think you should be rewarded for it in fantasy if you have that player. Now we don't play this in our league of record because on the website, which shall not be named, that we play on, it doesn't give us the option. But it is something I'm seeing pop up more and more, which it's a cool little fun wrinkle that you can add, which I like a lot. Have you ever played in a points per first down league, CJ?
No, man. I mean, I want to. I think you should. I don't think you could have to pick one or the other. I think you should double down. Double down on it, man. You get what I'm saying? I know the points probably be crazy, but double down. I mean, come on, make it fun. Make it a little exciting.
No, I agree. You can totally do that. That's more than fine. So yeah, I honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen one or the other. I feel like any league I've ever played, I'm thinking off the top of my head here, I think that any time I've ever been in one where it was points for first down, it was also a PPR. It's just one of those things where player, because usually points for first down, that doesn't have to be necessarily a catch. It can also be a run. So I just like it better. It's a fun wrinkle.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. There's something that you should know your scoring format. Another thing, we already talked about PPR, points per completion, so that's something, again, to pay attention to. There's ones that have bonus points per landmark. So in a lot of leagues, our league of record is this way as well. If you break, for instance, these thresholds, 100 rushing yards, 200 rushing yards, or receiving yards, you'll get bonus points. Like, it could be, he got 1 yard. Oh, he got to 100 yards on the day. And then because your league gives you 3 or 4 points, you get an extra 3 or 4 points for your fantasy player. So it's those performance benchmarks that give you extra production. So players like Julio Jones, who gets a lot of yards but not a lot of touchdowns, this is obviously something that's good for him. You'll also see things like where they have a big play. There'll be big play incentives. If they catch or rush the ball 40 yards, 50 yards, you'll get bonus points depending on that. If it was a big play like that and they went for a touchdown, you can get bonus points. There's a lot of little wrinkles in here. It's not standard. It's not something you're going to see most places. But if you're in a custom league, keep an eye out for it because it's something to take into account when you're picking your players because these big play bonuses, they kind of decentivize the short PPR receivers. So it kind of evens it out if you play both. Just putting that out there.
I agree.
Touchdown-only leagues, I am not a fan of these, but it's interesting. So essentially what happens here is you don't get points for yardage. You only get points for touchdowns. These are very low-scoring leagues. It's kind of what you expect. You want these guys who have touchdown potential, yardage, PPR guys, all those guys you can throw out the window. You want red zone threats. You want workhorse running backs. You want quarterbacks who throw the ball a lot. That's what you're looking for in these leagues. Have you ever played in one of these, CJ? I have, and it's interesting, but to me, it's just not fun. It takes too much strategy out of it.
As I was saying, I think the strategy what you really like, and I think what's one of the appealing things about fantasy football, especially if you have a deeper leagues, and you put your time in, you be able to see what's going on with players, and you invest in with their team and their production in there, with what they can be able to do with that. I feel like that takes it out of the way. So yeah, I would say stay away from that, because personally I wouldn't like that. I feel like you're taking away the fun of doing my research. And, I like to study, and you're robbing me. You're robbing me of this, because you're making it seem like it's pointless.
Exactly.
And
another interesting wrinkle, you see this only on a couple sites, head coach scoring. So what happens here generally is you'll get points based on the margin of victory that the team has in real life. So if the team coached up his team really well, you won by 10 points, 20 points, you'll get points based on that. So it's kind of these thresholds that award points to your fantasy team. So you have to go out and you have to draft a head coach. So that's a whole nother strategy, and that's very league specific, and we're not going to get into that now.
That seems like something like Madden would do. Like you could do something like that on Madden.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was inspired by Madden, if I'm honest. I don't know kind of where it popped up first, but it's something that I've seen. It was only one or two places. I'm starting to see it in a few more, but I've never played in one of these leagues. I have been asked to play in one, but I'm already in well over double-digit leagues, so I turned it down. But it was they were basically just screwing around with it. It was like, oh, if you win by 20 points, you get a point. So I was like, why even have it? It's not even worth. Obviously that's a last-round pick right there. The points are minuscule at best, so you won't usually see that if you're in one of these leagues. But it's keep an eye out. If you start seeing Bill Belichick drafted in the 12th round, you're gonna have some serious question marks. So yeah, that's something. So let's go to alternate league formats now. Things that you hear very commonly are things like keeper leagues. So obviously with the keeper league, players get to keep players based on their team that they had the previous year. Now, generally, you'll see they range from 1 to 5 keepers. For me, the sweet spot's kind of right around 3. Anything more than 3, you're getting closer to a dynasty league. Anything less than that, and it's a fun wrinkle to add to your redraft league, but it's not really a keeper league to me. So what you usually see is anywhere 1 to 5 people that you'll be able to keep from your team the previous year, and you'll be able to keep them based on some sort of penalty. You'll see leagues where, oh, well, you keep 5 guys, they're your first 5 picks. So that's obviously not great value there. You'll see ones where you keep them based on certain criteria. So for instance, you drafted, Todd Gurley last year in the 2nd round, and you have him this year for a 2nd round pick. So obviously that's great value there. So he's definitely worth keeping. You'll see leagues where it's that plus a round. So Todd Gurley would go as a 1st round pick this year in that same scenario, which is still worth it. Depending on what you're drafting, if you know that, maybe not, because maybe you'll have a shot at him anyway, and you'll get to keep someone else. But, those are all wrinkles league dependent. CJ, what do you like about keeper leagues? Anything that you think the people should know?
For me, it's the keeper leagues. One thing that I like is those guys I put good research in. So like I'm famous for saying, when Antonio Brown first came out, in our keeper league, I paid attention to the Steelers. I saw that, Mike Wallace was on his way out, and I was like, who's going to be that next guy there? And, I checked in onto a preseason game one time and saw Antonio Brown and saw, how him and Big Roethlisberger were making magic. And I was like, whoa, that guy's going to be something special. So I ended up drafting him. And then he has been on my team ever since then in that keeper league. So you got those guys that are like that. I do like those formats where you depend on how many, like you said, how many keepers you pick. That's your first 5 rounds. We had a question. I think we had a question. What was that last week? Where that guy was talking about the keepers that he should keep, and he got that Alvin Kamara like in the 12th round or something like that. Oh, that's 8th, money. I think, that's, the 8th or some around like that. That's money.
Obvious choice.
Dude, I'm definitely taking that. So you got gems like that you can get. And, if you transfer them over to the keepers for the following year, your team, you got the good solid of your team set, and then you just go out there and pick up whatever else you like. So I'm a big supporter of it, and I would suggest that for everybody else, if that's a league that you have, I would say, yeah, you can do keepers. Now I don't, in the league that we do, our major one, I wouldn't suggest that, just because I know certain people and how they play. So if they have their guy, I want to force them to redraft. But
and that's an auction draft strategy for us there. That's why we don't do it, and I agree. That's why we always see people propose that rule, but it never passes.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, no, I agree. And it's all strategy you have to take into account, and you have to know, what's a good value. A lot of keeper leagues to keep things like that from happening, because that we talked about. Was it TJ? I think his name was. He got Alvin Kamara in I think it was the 8th round. Regardless, let's say it was the 8th. In a lot of keeper leagues, that's his value from then until whenever you drop him. You don't want that. You want it to be either limited or you want there to be a penalty. If it's an auction draft, 80 their average auction value AAV, maybe with an additional percentage. If it's a standard redraft league, snake draft, linear, whatever, it's your ADP maybe plus around. Move it up. Limit how long you can have them. You want those things, because otherwise those teams that drafted rookies just at the right time and they broke out, those teams are going to be the same forever, which is great, but they're always going to be substantially better teams. So it takes a layer of strategy out of it, which I think there should definitely be. So that's a little bit of analysis there. So yeah, but that's a keeper league. You can keep players from one year to the other. That's the short and sweet of it.
One thing you can do, they'd probably get rid of that, to be honest, is like, okay, so you would have to, you have to definitely keep your eyes on it if you're a league manager. But if you see that trend continue to consist, like, okay, so somebody somebody just drafted Zeke Elliott. What was that, 2 years ago? He came out? 2 years ago. All right, so
this is the third season, yeah.
Yeah, it's third season. So you can only keep a certain player for 3 years, like 3 years. So if it's if you tell them they can be able to keep three players, and they kept that person, so now they're forced to let them go because you've already maxed out your years on keeping them. I would like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And now we're obviously getting much more in depth into something we're going to probably talk about in the future, but it's all good stuff.
I'm giving you gems, league managers. Yeah. I'm just letting you know what you can be able to do. Give me your ideas, man.
Yeah, it's all strategies. There's a lot of different wrinkles and ways to approach it, but we got a lot more to talk about, so we're going to move on to a very similar yet very different format. Dynasty leagues. Now, in dynasty leagues, you have massively extended rosters. Depending on your league, I've seen everything from 20 to I've seen one where you had 50-person benches. Generally, what happens here is you draft your team when you have your startup, and that's your team. They will usually do rookie-only drafts, which obviously we talked about rookie ADPs for dynasty a week ago or so, I think it was, and that's what they'll do. They'll drop players and they'll create openings in their roster by dropping certain players and filling out these rookies, and that's what you do year to year. That's the main difference between dynasty and keepers, that you basically keep everybody. What are your thoughts on dynasty, CJ? Anything that you think that people should know?
I think you pretty much covered it on dynasty. I kind of, just basically it's the big brother of keeper leagues to me, so I think we kind of covered that already.
That's a good way to put it. I would say it's definitely the next step from a keeper league is the dynasty league, and I will say I love dynasty leagues, and this is why I wish that our league of record had some sort of keeper aspect to it, because it keeps the league engaged all year round. A lot of the times in these, you'll know your draft order for rookie drafts. You'll see people making trades during the offseason to move up priority. Like this year, everybody's trying to trade up to that 101 spot because they want Sam Darnold. Not Sam Darnold. Jeez. Saquon Barkley. Jeez, what's wrong with me? Nobody's trading up for Sam Darnold. I mean, I'm sure somebody is somewhere, but you shouldn't be. He's a value pick, but for me, he's end of the first. But yeah, it's a lot of strategy. It's very engaging. It's a lot of fun. You got to know your stuff, and yeah, I like that. It's a good way to put it, CJ. Big brother to keeper league. So, yep, that's a dynasty league. Let's go to a favorite of the show. We'll put it that way. IDP leagues. You'll hear us talk about this all the time, yet we don't talk about it very much here on the main show because it is a realm of fantasy football that is often steered clear of by most players because it's something that most people don't talk about. It's something most people don't know about. People don't know the strategy. People don't know the players. And IDP, of course, is individual defensive players. So instead of drafting your DST, your defense/special teams unit, you draft individual players. Now, You'll see everything from smaller IDP leagues where they just have one flex position. You can just draft a defensive player. You'll see a lot where it has maybe 3 spots, so you can draft one from each position, a lineman, a defensive back, a linebacker. You'll see ones that might have maybe 2 per spot because they require you to have a defensive lineman and a defensive end. One that requires a middle linebacker and an outside linebacker, middle/inside or outside. You'll see ones where it requires safety and corner. So you'll see a lot of these different wrinkles, and this is already where it starts getting intimidating. A lot of you are probably like, what? Or you get crazy like our big league of record where we fielded a full 11-man defense as you would see in a typical NFL team. So there's a lot of different ways to approach IDP, and there's a lot of different scoring formats because it's so few and far between that there's not necessarily a true standard. There's universal norms that you usually see, but it's something that a very minute percentage of fantasy players play, and it is amazing. It requires you to know so much more, and your knowledge base when watching football is so much better, and it gives you a rooting value in more games. I've got a defensive back on this team playing at 4:00, and normally you wouldn't care if your offensive players were on the field, but now your defensive guy is, so you have a vested interest in watching those plays. It's just so much more fun and so much more engaging. I love IDP leagues. I'll just say that you have to know your stuff and you have to know the approach. As Jason talked about on Tuesday's show, you don't necessarily want the elite cornerbacks that never get thrown to, because when you get to the end of the day, fantasy football is a stats-driven game. If they never get thrown on, they're never getting batted balls, they're never getting interceptions, they're never getting tackles, and therefore they're not getting you fantasy production. So that's, again, where knowing the scoring and how IDP works kind of comes into play. Anything you want to add without going into too much detail here, CJ?
I mean, you covered all of it, man. I love me some IDP, and I definitely like you said, it gets you more involved in other games and make you maybe to watch more of them. So you be a lot more knowledgeable about the game, and especially about defenses and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
It makes Sundays that much more entertaining, and that's always a fun thing. Another thing you'll see very often, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about, is daily fantasy. So the way daily fantasy works, this is what you see on most of the major I don't want to call them gambling sites because they're not, but they are. So things like FanDuel, DraftKings, they're generally a salary cap style fantasy football league. So you have a set amount of money, and every single week, every player has an assigned value, and this is site-specific. So you'll jump into any number of bidding formats, whether that's one-on-one matchups if you're top 50, so you'll see 100 people in a league. The top 50 people win, and they get money. The bottom 50 lose, and they pay the money. You'll see tournament styles. You'll see a lot of different things here. Generally what happens here is, again, the website determines the value of each player, and you have a set amount of money to fill your roster based on these players. A lot of people will do a strategy where they get a couple studs that they think are going to have amazing weeks, and they try and fill in to get under the salary cap. You'll see people who are doing 1 or 2 truly high-end, you break the bank on them type guys, and then they try and find values that they might have a decent floor. There's a lot of different ways to approach this, but you're not drafting your league standardly. You get a new team every single week, and it's all fitting it under this salary cap. So it's a lot of fun, but it's a very different approach to fantasy. And obviously money is generally changing hands with this, so it's not for everybody. Check your state's guidelines to see if you can even play daily fantasy if you're on one of these bidding sites. CJ, anything you want to add to talking about daily fantasy?
I like money, so yeah.
I mean, I went through a whole winter paying my bills just on daily fantasy, so I'm a big fan. But it's not for everybody. It's not for the people who lose their money, that's for sure. I wouldn't recommend it on your first outing. If you're new to fantasy football, I would stay clear of daily fantasy. That'd be my pro tip. And let's go to one other one worth talking about, and that is best ball leagues. Now, best ball leagues are a pretty up-and-coming thing. They're getting more popular with every passing year. What happens here is you see a lot of teams drafting right now. There are teams drafting back in March and April, May, and now into June. There are plenty of people who are drafting. And the reason they can get away with that is because they are best ball leagues. What happens in a best ball league is you draft your team, and the website automatically plugs in whoever had the highest scoring week on your team into your starting lineup. So you never touch it. You draft your team, and then you just kind of walk away, and you see how you do week to week and with your matchups. So maybe you thought, I'm going to grab, Darius Geis in the 8th or 9th round, and he goes out there and puts up the second highest performance from a running back. But he was a terrible matchup, so you wouldn't have started him in your standard league. Well, the website will automatically put him in as your running back 1 or 2, and you get those points. So that's kind of how it works. It's fun, and you'll see a lot of people who are in like 20, 50, 100 of these leagues because they require no maintenance or upkeep. You don't add drop. Your team is your team, so you have to take into account when drafting bye weeks and things of that nature and adding a lot of depth at key positions to worry about injuries. But beyond that, it's just set it and forget it. So anything you want to add when it comes to best ball leagues?
It's a format. I mean, it's a league that I've heard about. I just never really got into doing it. But I mean, if that's something that maybe if your friends want to get into that, if you want to come together, collaborate as a team, go ahead and go for it. I wouldn't be against it, and that would probably be more of a thing that I would probably do. I don't know if I can just do it by myself and be that invested into it.
I will say that if you are in a best ball league, because of the automatically being put in when you have a big week thing, I would target a lot of these high ceiling players regardless of their floor, because if they have a bunch of bad weeks, they're not in your lineup. But they have that one Julio Jones 300 yards and a touchdown type week, well, you're going to be doing really well that week. So it'll automatically plug them in. Multiple quarterbacks is obviously even more important here because quarterbacks score a lot, and from week to week, some have monster performances, so that you want that automatically put in. High-end handcuffs as well, so especially if somebody goes down, you could have some serious production there. Some things that you're definitely going to prioritize maybe more than you normally would. I guess with that, let's just talk about a couple of different draft formats, and then I think we'll have done a nice overview. Obviously, redraft. We consider to be standard leagues. That's simply that you have your team, you draft your team, you play through the season, you move on to the next year, and you start from scratch. That is a redraft league. Now, whether you do that through, as we already talked about, linear drafts, which I don't recommend because those are geared towards people who have a bad season having a better season because they get higher priority with every single round. That's how you see NFL drafts work, and that's why they work in that way. They want the bad teams to get better. I really do. I like linear drafts when it comes to drafting rookies in dynasty leagues. Beyond that, I can't stress it enough. Don't do it. It's very broken. Snake drafts are standard. That's what you see probably 95% of the time. And that's where, you go through the first round, you get to the 12th pick in a standard 12-team league. The 12th team gets to pick twice because you move down to the second round, and he has the first pick in that round, and you continue on. So if you're new to fantasy, that's how it works. Or the auction drafts, which is something that we talk about all the time and we love very much here, where you assign values to players. If you want a player, you can go get him, but you have to be willing to pay up because other people are going to be bidding money with you. Yep. And we'll talk about that more in a second. So however you go about drafting your team, you have your team, you add, drop, you trade, you do whatever you want, and then at the end of the year, you leave that team behind, you start fresh the next year. That is what a redraft league is. You're going to hear us say that expression all the time. If you're unfamiliar with it, now you know what we're talking about. So speaking of auction, let's dive in a little bit on it here. So auction leagues, and again, we're going to have a whole special on it. You hear us always ramp up when we start talking about auction because we're so passionate about it. It's awesome. It's to us universally the best way to draft a fantasy team. It's so much fun. It makes a whole day of the event, and it's much more cutthroat. It's a lot more strategic. It's a lot of fun. So what happens is when it's your turn to pick, normally you would pick your player, and he's on your team. That's not how it works in an auction draft. When it's your turn, you pick a player. That player is then nominated. Now, you can set for how much money. Generally, you'll just hit nominate, and it's a $1 bid, and then $1 comes out of your account, and then everyone else has a chance to bid on them. Whoever has the highest bid ends up paying that amount. Everyone else doesn't pay anything. That player goes to that team. That team loses the money, and then they have their budget they have to work with to draft their team throughout the entire draft. So it's very different from daily fantasy because daily is salary cap format. This is the way that you play auction. So auction is amazing. It's a lot more strategic. You can bid up other players, which you can't do in daily because daily it's team by team. It's completely independent. In auction, if, for instance, we're in a league with Jason Cabrera and Larry Fitzgerald gets nominated, everyone knows, well, we're going to bid up Larry Fitzgerald because Jason's probably going to pay it. That's true with all of us, and this is where knowing your league kind of comes into effect, and I'm getting already a little bit more into it than I wanted to because we love auction so much. But, basically, you nominate a player. That player goes up for bidding. Everyone can bid on that player, thus an auction, and whoever is willing to pay the most wins the player and pays the money. So that's the way auction drafting works. Anything you want to add, CJ?
Man, you killed it, man. You killed it.
Yep. Come up with your budget, guys. Assign your values, because your value is going to be different than everyone else, and you need to know how you want to approach it. And we'll get into strategies with auction later, and it's a mind game. It's a it's a lot of fun. It's intense. But don't let that scare you. You should totally do it.
Definitely should do it.
Peer pressure.
So fun.
Peer pressure. So let's see. We already talked about linear drafts and straight drafts. Obviously, like we said, linear straight through. Snake is you get to the end of the round, you turn around, you start working your way back. And then the other thing that's worth talking about, this pops up a little bit more, I think, lately than I get questions about this a lot. I don't know if you do, CJ, but slow drafts. So if you ever have been invited to a slow draft league, or you simply don't know what it is and you've heard of it, the way slow draft works, now this is different case by case. You can do this with an auction. You can do this with a typical draft. Basically what happens here is it's usually done offline. It's usually done via an email chain. Usually you will pick your player, okay? Now it's a slow draft. Then it moves on to the next guy. That guy doesn't have your typical 45 seconds to a minute and a half to pick. Usually he has anywhere from 4 hours to a day to make his pick. These drafts take forever, but at the end of it, you can't say you made a mistake because you had a lot of time to make your decision, do your research. Sometimes these ones allow you to trade picks, and you'll see a lot more of that in leagues that allow it in slow drafts because there's a lot more time to negotiate and get a hold of people. In auctions, usually it'll be like, oh, well, okay, so we've nominated Player X. Player X is up for auction for the next 6 hours, and everyone kind of sends in their bids, and it's silent in that aspect, and then whoever wins gets the guy. There's a lot of different approach to slow drafts, and it's interesting. I've been in one once. It's fun, but, I mean, when your draft starts, be prepared to sink a couple weeks to a month into your drafts. It's interesting. It's very different. I recommend everybody try it once. CJ, have you ever done a slow draft?
I have not. And I probably will not do that. It's way too long.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's constantly just kind of in the back of your mind, like, oh crap, who's up? I don't have no idea what's going on. We've been at this for a week, and I have no idea whose pick it even is.
Right.
So it's fun. It's different. It's not my go-to, but it's something I would recommend experiencing at least once. It's fun. Okay. How are we doing on time? Let's see. All right, we're about 50 minutes. So you know what? With that, let's get out of here. So hopefully that's helpful to you guys. We really want to just kind of break down a lot of the lingo that you're probably hearing around the industry on various social medias, websites, TV programming, NFL Network, things of that nature. Expressions you're going to hear us and many other podcasts talk about. And now you know what we're talking about. You kind of know what goes into it. And we're going to deep dive on a lot of these different things as we move further into the offseason, closer into draft season. And we'll be doing a lot of auction drafts to kind of show you these concepts and theories and practices in work and obviously deep diving the strategies behind them. So that's going to be upcoming episodes. If you guys have any questions, make sure you guys submit them wherever you're listening. Easiest way to get a hold of us, of course, is Facebook.com/the Fantasy Football Fanatics. On Twitter, we're pretty active there. We are at the FF Fanatics, so that's 3 Fs, at the FF Fanatics. Or individually, I'm at G Palmer FFF. CJ is at CJ Hickman 89. You can email them to thefantasyfootballfanatics@gmail.com. A lot of ways to get your questions in. We get a lot, and we do our best to get to all of them. We promise you we will do our best. Any parting thoughts, CJ?
Hey man, keep the comments going on the YouTube, man. I've been checking the YouTube videos. Not a lot of comments going on there, man. Send us some questions, or you just want to just rap to us, man, or say, hey, Jason, where's Jason at? He's been talking all that stuff. Just say something, I like to see what's going on. But man, actually, shout out to the fans, man, because I look back at one of our videos that we, it was Griffin and I back in the day, man. I think it was something a mock draft or something we did, man. Over 1,000 views, man. I think I'll say what's up to that, man.
Oh, nice.
That. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Which one was that? That's going.
It's back in the day, man. It's back in your people's old place.
Wow, going back to like the 2016 season there.
Yeah, man.
Oh, yeah, man. Look at that. And a lot of that information, as long as we're not talking news, is probably still relevant. So there you go. Hopefully that's helpful. All right. Well, with that, let's get out of here. We will see you guys on Tuesday. We'll be back with a whole nother show, a whole nother fun topic, and maybe we'll answer some of your questions in the show as well. So send them in, and we will see you guys then. We hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Take care, guys. Bye.
Life in the fast lane, moving at the speed of life, and I can't slow down. Only got a gallon in the gas tank, but I'm almost at the finish line, so I can't stop now. I don't really know where I'm headed, just enjoying the ride. Just gonna roll I die.